So I got to field observe in 2 different periods for 7th grade English language arts classroom. I worked with 4 students total. 3 of them were level 1 ESL students, and 1 of them was a level 3 ESL student. So I'm going to be pulling my 3 examples from those 2 different classrooms. One of them is coming from my level 3 student, the other 2 are coming from my level 1 student. The first one comes from my level 3 student. She was a mastered writer and reader. She was just struggling with her pronunciation of words. So in the statement that she was making in one of our class lessons, she was trying to say, there are 3 different sports: soccer, baseball, and basketball. But her pronunciation was extremely different. She ends up saying, there are 3 sports: soccer, baseball, and basketball. So below what she had pronounced, I wrote down the actual IPA translations that we use in English. For this first portion, there are 3 sports. You'll note that she mispronounces there, 3, and sports. With there, the student uses the alveolar voiced stop D instead of the interdental voiced fricative. So she's making the sound dare instead of the for there. R is fine, and then we come to 3, where again she makes an error, and she replaces the interdental voiceless fricative sound with the alveolar voiceless stop T. So she says tree, and she should be saying 3. Sports, she says it fairly well, and then she gets to this last S, and she pronounces that S with the alveolar voiced fricative Z. So she's saying sports instead of sports. She also makes this error when we come to these last 2 words. Again, this is where she starts making similar mispronunciations. She says baseball and basketball. So again, the student has pronounced the alveolar voiced fricative Z in place of that voiceless S, but also with the word ball in both baseball and basketball, she has misplaced that vowel. So she's using a close mid-back O in comparison to all for baseball and basketball. So that's just one statement that she made in class, and those are her pronunciations. My second example comes from my ELL student who was writing an essay for a practice SAGE test, and I'll actually show you. I wrote down my corrections to what he had written down. So I'll show you first what he had. And he wrote, I think the rides have too much people and the people have too much weight and is billed with still because the car is moving fast and don't get broken. So here the student makes a few different errors. Obviously grammatically he's got some misspellings, and then he's using prepositions in place of that adverb to, too. With the misspellings, I did note that it seems that most of his misspellings come from the fact that he is relying on his pronunciation within, as he's speaking to himself for writing, because he hasn't mastered writing or reading. So when we have the word have, he actually just doesn't even add that H at the beginning of the word. He just says AVE. I would say that the mispronunciations there come from, again, how he was pronouncing it. He's avoiding the glottal H when he's saying have in his head. He's saying av. So he should be saying have, and therefore that's why he's missing that H. With much, he misplaces that U for the vowel O. And then as we continue on, the student says too much and too many. But he's actually using the prepositional to, which is just to. And again, this is an error that a lot of native English speakers actually make as well. But for this case, he shouldn't be using it as though it's a preposition. If he were to be, he would be explaining like, I'm going to the store. So he's connecting two clauses. Whereas here, he's trying to describe the excess of something. So he, in both cases, is saying too much and too many. He should be using two O's because he's describing excess. He's not supposed to be using the prepositional to. The second, or the third thing that I noted was that he uses a passive build instead of the passive built. So when I read the sentence that I corrected his with, I read it as saying, the roller coaster is built with steel. And I believe that's what he's trying to get across. But again, he's not referring to the active case of built. And then when he comes to the end of his sentence, he says with steel because the car is moving fast and don't get broken. Here, he should be using the word won't. And then this is a case where he has misused tenses. So the student was working very hard to understand all different tenses. And so in this case, he was trying his best to use that affix ed. And so in the case of saying like, I walked the dog or I baked a cake, he wants to be using that ed for the word broken. But as you'll note, based off of grammar rules, you can't have that additional ed. So I, instead, would have used the word break. So I would just say, again, the car is moving fast and won't break versus get broken. My final example is again another written piece. This is from my other language level 1 student, and they were describing Beauty and the Beast, the movie, and the student made a few errors that are actually interesting in this short little sentence. He was asked to write about the movie and what the characters were showing to the audience, and he says, the Bella looks sad. So here, as we note, he's correctly noted that this is the subject of his sentence, but he's using that determiner the, and in this case he doesn't need that. So if we were using an object, for example, if he was saying the movie is sad, that determiner is perfectly fine there, but here that name, Bella, which is the or Belle, should be Belle, is the subject of the sentence, so he doesn't even need that determiner, so he can just completely get rid of that. Look, this is where he could have been using that affix that he uses, that his the other student uses in the last writing portion. He says that Bella looks sad, and for the most part of this example, or this assignment that he was writing, he was using the past tense, so he should have added that suffix ed in order to note that he's referring to this in past tense. And then sad really relies to the fact that he, again, hasn't fully understood reading, doesn't understand spelling in English as well, so he uses two Ds, whereas he should have been using one, and then simple punctuation, just a period, because that is the end of the sentence. So, those are my 3 examples, and thank you.